Yes. So Temple, if you allow us 5 more minutes or 10 more minutes, we'll let the participant join.
No problem. I can wait. I just like to get on early and make sure everything's working.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you. And really nice. Thank you so much for your message yesterday. It was a really nice gesture and surprise. Thank you for that.
No, I want to help out all the parents because some of these kids are really bright and they need to be making your next tech things. There's a really big need for improving interfaces. And I was on invited to give a presentation at a veterinary conference, and they wanted to spend an hour training me how to use the interface.
Wow. Okay.
And they wanted all this weird stuff. And I finally got mad and I said, Zoom has all the business because I didn't have to learn how to use it.
Wow. Okay. But that's nice. So Temple, I'm sure in most of the conference you must have so many questions. In fact, we have more than 100 questions this time around. So I'm just giving you a heads up.
Well, just a lot of the questions I have found, there's certain questions that come up over and over again. So out of those 100 questions, you probably have, I'm going to say maybe almost half of them will be 5 basic questions. I get asked all the time, my kids are diagnosed with autism. Well, the first thing I have to know is that a 3-year-old, I've got an answer for that. If it's an older kid that's getting bullied in school, that's a little different situation.
Okay. No, absolutely. So what our team has done that they have created themes out of that question so that we'll try to cover as many themes as possible. Some are on food, some are on homeschooling, some are on, in fact, the future of these kids. So we have tried to create themes, and really nice to see that we have parents from New Mexico, Doha, Qatar, Dubai, UAE. So we have parents.
You've got people from countries outside of India coming in on the call, or just it looks like everybody on here now looks like they've got an Indian name.
Yeah, so we got questions from 5 countries, and we are expecting parents from almost 7 to 8 countries right now.
Oh, good. This is one of the good sides of doing things online is you get questions you didn't have before.
Got it. And absolutely.
You get people coming in from other countries that weren't there before.
Yes, absolutely. And probably not the good thing, COVID, but yes, COVID has taught us to be totally online, and we have realized 50% of our in-person meeting can be on online. So that's fantastic.
Yep, and we've got I've done talks in Brazil, lots of different places.
Right. And let's see. In fact, I'll just a quick dipstick check. We have 100 participants so far. We'll just give them 10 more minutes
Oh, that's fine. No, we'll wait until it's the time. We won't start until it's the time.
Correct.
Just fine. No, be happy to wait on that.
So are you doing any new book, Temple, anytime soon?
Well, I'm working on a book on visual thinking because I'm an extreme visual thinker, and my kind of thinking is very good at certain kinds of things, like looking at these. I just did a thing like an hour-long rehearsal on the most horrible conference virtual interface that you could possibly imagine, and you need to have people like me to make the interfaces. I can't do the programming. I was doing a conference with Brazil, and the Zoom system went down in Brazil, in all of Brazil. And so we had to switch, and I had the cell phones so I could talk to them. And 3 hours later, something called StreamYard.com came up. I'd never seen it before. I used it perfectly. I didn't have to learn how to use it. It was obvious how to use it. And that's an up and coming platform. It's going to get the business. Because it came up on the screen, I'd never seen it before, and I used it just fine. I didn't have to learn how to be taught how to use it.
That's good. That means they have very good interface. That means it's pretty.
Well, the programmers, I can't do programming, but they need the visual thinkers to design the interfaces.
Right, right. And when you slated for your next book, this year or sometime next year on visual thinking?
Well, it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be a while because we're writing it right now. And then books to get published. Once
Right.
you get them sent into the publisher, they have to go through all of their copy editing, their editing. I've got a book that's going to be coming out this spring called Outdoor Scientist. And it's a book about kids' experiments and outdoor things that kids can do, you know, get them outside, get them out doing things. And we need to be getting kids, you know, there's time to get them off the screens and get them doing things. Kids
Right.
aren't doing enough stuff. This is my most basic book on autism right here, the way I see it. It's a
Yeah.
whole lot of little short chapters
Right.
that you don't have to read the book cover to cover. You can just pick out little chapters and read them.
Okay, so maybe what we can do, Temple, maybe for all the participants and all the registered user, we'll send the link for this book because I've read this book, oh no, not that's Thinking in Pictures, but we can send it across for parents, especially if they want to pick the sum of the chapter.
Well, Thinking in Pictures is my autobiography. This book is my most general book, and it has little short chapters from, you know, early intervention, learning to drive, different kinds of thinking, diagnosis, and for teachers and parents, newly diagnosed child would be a really good book. You know, Thinking in Pictures is more my personal view. It's my autobiography. And then I have a book of children's projects right here called Calling All Minds.
Okay.
Just simple children's projects like here, like making, like you do things like cut out a paper snowflake, for example. Kids aren't doing hands-on things. And in industry, we need all the different kinds of minds. And I can tell you on these interfaces, these websites, these horrible platforms that got out there now, they're going to go out of business. They're so.
Absolutely. In fact, Temple, I'm just thinking aloud. Maybe what we'll do after this event, maybe we'll request for a signed copy of you, couple of books, and we can distribute to our parents who have given these questions, so that
I can get, and you'll have to, what we'll have to do on that, how many books, because there's, you know, maybe what I ought to do is sign little stickers, book plates that you could put in the books, and then you can order the books from Amazon. That's going to be your cheapest way to get them.
Yes.
And I could send you like what they call book plates, little stickers that you can stick in the books, because otherwise shipping the books is going to get very expensive.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah. No,
And
we'll do that. Our team will find out some.
you can paste the stickers with my signature on it into the books.
We'll do that. I think that's a good idea.
That'll be a lot easier, because then I just send over a big envelope with the signature in it.
Yes.
And these books also are available electronically, and obviously I can't sign those, but in places where the mail or the delivery is a problem, I'm finding in a lot of parts of the world they'd rather do ebooks because getting packages is a problem.
That's a problem. Plus, it's easy to carry in a device on your phone, Kindle, and you can carry almost 500 books along with you without any load or burden. So it's easy to read that way.
Well, that's just it. That's right. No, that's absolutely right.
So Temple, what we'll do, I know there are only 5 minutes left. So once I'll introduce, I'll hand it over to you. There are many parents. We can see almost 130 participants and expecting to grow more. There are a lot of inquisitive questions from the parents. So once you're through with your slides, I'll start reading the questions.
So I think okay, you do have my slides?
No, we'll give you right to share the slides right now. And if you want, I can share if you can.
Okay, well, the thing is, maybe we'll just start talking and you can just give them the deck of slides.
Okay. So should...
Now, how long is this entire session? How long is it?
As long as you want, it can be 1 hour, it can be 1.5 hours. It's totally based on your convenience.
All right, well, I probably can't go, I have another appointment in 2 hours from now.
Okay, okay. So we'll slate the session on an hour or hour and a half, bit depends on the questions we have from the parents, and totally as per your convenience, Temple, we can work it out on the timing part. Coming on the slides part, Temple, there's a share screen on your Zoom, and our team has given you the right to share screen. If you want to share screen, it's good. Otherwise, just send me across the template. I'll share it from my screen. Temple, you want to share your slides with me, or you'll be sharing on the screen?
Well, okay, I need to see them. I don't think I want to show all those slides. I think maybe the best thing to do is just give the slides to the parents and we'll just answer questions. I find that lots of times that works better.
No, we can do that.
Okay.
So yeah, 3 more minutes and then we'll start off. And whoever joined on the group, guys, if you have any question for Temple, please send it on the chat. And if we are not going via presentation, like Temple said, we'll take all your questions. So please use the chat box and our team will unmute you if required for your questions. So please feel free to ask question, ask anything. It's your child, it's your profession. Please do ask. We are here to learn from Temple, so please don't hesitate to ask anything which is on your mind. This is my request to all the participants. Okay, so Temple, you fine if I start?
That will be just fine.
Yep.
That will be just fine.
Okay, so let me formally start now, Temple, and good morning to you, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our parents from India and across the globe. I am Nitin Bindlish, founder and CEO of Mons Belief, and I'm really honored and privileged to have Dr. Temple Grandin as a part of Mons Belief family. Guys, you know, she is one of the renowned speaker on autism. And let me give a small background on Dr. Temple, but I know you all know Dr. Temple, but let me give a small background on what all she did. So Dr. Grandin was the first individual with ASD to record her experience in a way that gave the rest of the world an insight into the world of autism. I read 2 books. So some of her books are Thinking in Pictures, published in 1995. And the latest one I read was The Autistic Brain, Thinking Across the Spectrum, which was published in 2013, I believe. Throughout her life, she has been outspoken about the rights and difficulty faced by individuals similar to herself. She has been an advocate for early intervention for autistic children to channelize autistic fixation toward more fruitful path. Early intervention is the key. That's always a key message. Dr. Temple Grandin obtained her master's in animal science from Arizona State University and went to receive her PhD in same stream from University of Illinois. Along with being a professor of livestock behavior and faculty design at Colorado State University, She's also an expert consultant for the entire industry. Now, the most interesting part is having authored numerous books and articles. She's also an HBO movie. She also has an HBO movie titled Temple Grandin, starring Claire Danes, which is based on a life story. So this is truly an inspirational. And folks, when I was chatting with Temple yesterday, Dr. Temple yesterday, I told her that she's an inspiration to all of us. And with that, I would formally like to introduce or welcome Dr. Temple. Dr. Temple, over to you. The floor is yours. Please let us know how it's really like being in the part of this world. So over to you, Dr. Temple. Over to you.
Hi, really great to be here. I just think I'll just tell a little bit about myself. When I was 3, I looked very severe. I had no speech. And fortunately, I went into a very good early educational program where I had hours of one-to-one teaching, where they taught me my words, and they taught me also turn taking. How do you take turns at a game? Okay, one of the questions that's come up on the chat already mentioned impulse control. Well, teaching turn taking is one of the ways to teach impulse control, because you have to wait and take your turn. And when I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, I'd start out with little, just maybe taking turns with an object. And I was really little, a little bit older, board games, simple board games where you shake dice and move pieces on a board. And then what tends to happen when you work with the little kids, you work with them really hard, some of them get talking, like me, and there's others that will stay with more problems. But when the children are very small, 3, 4 years old, I looked really severe. Now, fortunately, I did not have epilepsy. That was a really good sign. Now, as I got older, I was taught manners. You have to teach these kids how to behave. Somebody just mentioned their child's touching himself in the genitals. You have to teach him. There's only certain places you're allowed to do that. Your own bedroom, for example. Other places you're not allowed to do it. And just very matter of fact, teach when certain behaviors are allowed and when other behaviors are not. I was brought up where you were taught to have good manners. And if I did something that was bad manners, let's say I picked up rice with my fingers, mother would say, use the fork or use the spoon. She'd give the instruction on what to do. But teaching impulse control is really important. Now, when autistic kids grow up, they vary a lot. We're using technology right now that probably was made by some people with autism. Some of the programmers, they're not very social, but they're really brilliant. And they make the technology that we're using right now. That's the mild end of the spectrum. I'm going to estimate that about half of the programmers that work on technology like we have today and other technologies like your phone and are undiagnosed mild autism. But these would be the cases where there's no speech delay. This is what they used to call Asperger's, where there's no speech delay. It's very, very variable. Michelangelo may have been autistic. Einstein did not talk until he was 3. He would be in a special education program today. Edison may be autistic. You might want to look at Bill Gates. There's some old depositions that are on TV for an old lawsuit where he's asked difficult questions and he rocks. It's back in the late 80s. Bill Gates antitrust depositions, videos, look them up. Well, the thing about a person with autism is as they learn more and more, they can learn how to behave. It's sort of like you have to fill up the database. Now, when it comes to jobs when they grow up, visual thinkers like me can be really, really good at art. Another thing we can be extremely good at is high-end skilled trades. Somebody has to make things. Like, let's look at working in the space program. You've got a space program now. We had our Mars rover. Somebody in a shop had to build that. People built that. And that's usually not done by the more mathematical engineers. So you're going to have some people that are visual thinkers, where everything they think about is a picture. And if you watch the HBO movie, Temple Grandin, that shows exactly how I think. That's accurate. But that is not true for all of the children. Others are mathematicians. See, a little bit of autism gives you mathematicians and computer programmers. Then the third type of thinking is the word thinker. This is the child that loves history, loves facts, and they think in words. So you have visual thinkers like me who think in pictures. You've got the word thinkers, and then you've got the mathematical thinkers. See, a little bit of autism, you can have, somebody's really brilliant, but not very social. Too much autism, and then you get somebody who can't talk. And somebody, okay, let's just look at some of these questions. I'm seeing stem cell therapy, forget it. Let me discuss how I look at evidence-based. If something is expensive, possibly dangerous, or very time-consuming, it has to have really good evidence-based. But then there's other things that sometimes work, like there's some dyslexia that's caused by seeing the print jiggle on the page. There's a problem in the system in the back of the brain that assembles the graphic files. There's systems in the brain that do that. They don't really know how they work. Strokes break them in really weird ways. But some kids complain of the print jiggling on the page, and you can do a very simple thing just to print their homework on maybe light blue paper or light gray paper, and it will help them with the reading. Now that's something that's cheap, it's not dangerous, and if it doesn't work, I've just wasted a few pieces of paper. I don't have to have very high evidence base for that. And I've seen it help some people, not everybody. I'm getting a lot of questions about impulse control, tantrums. One of the things that was done with me, when I went to kindergarten, that would be at age 5 when I went to school. I'm not sure what you call that in India. There were very clear rules. If I had a tantrum, there was no television that night. Very clear rules, home and school. It's very important that the parents and the teachers are very consistent on what's being done. Now, I've got 2 complaints on the chat board about not hearing audio. I hope we're not having problems with that. Okay, I think they got something got fixed, but maybe there was something wrong with audio. Now they are recording it, so maybe you'll be able to, hear it later. Here's another question about whether you should go to special school or normal school. I went to a normal school for the young childhood education up through age 12. I did not work in a regular high school for the older kids, had to go to special school. The other thing we've got to do, and there's a lot of questions here about vocation, is teaching kids working skills. That starts with little kids doing chores, like maybe help with cooking, help with cleaning the house. And then when they get, maybe 11 years old, 10 years old, they need to get some jobs where they do a little task, maybe help out in a little local store, where they do a task on a schedule outside the family. That is really important that they do that. Because they've got to learn how to follow direction somebody outside of home. Because what I'm seeing in the United States is we've had teenagers, they're top honors students, really good grades, they're a very good student, but then they're not able to handle the workplace. Now I'm getting a lot of questions here about aggressive behavior, hitting, all kinds of things like this. Now, most of these questions I cannot answer just from the question. I would have to ask a lot more questions, like when does he hit? You can get kids that get into sensory overload when they're in a noisy place. You take them in the train station, for example. They might get into sensory overload. And then another child doesn't have that problem. Or maybe a kid learns that he can hit and get out of doing something. So you have to figure out what's causing the hitting. Is it sensory? And if you have a child that's nonverbal, then you must rule out a painful hidden medical problem that they can't tell you about. Maybe they're constipated, maybe they have an earache, or maybe their sinuses hurt, or they have a toothache or stomach ache that they cannot tell you what they've got. So if you have a child on the spectrum that's nonverbal and their behavior's been really good, and then one day it starts getting terrible, I have to rule out a hidden painful medical problem. That's the first thing that you have to do. Yeah, most of these questions, I think what we want to do, I'm going to have to get somebody on here, and some of these questions I can start to answer. Sleep issues, that's a common problem. I had that. And the way mother handled that is I could stay up all night if I wanted to, but I couldn't run around the house. And I had to be up in the morning to be ready for school the next day. I was allowed to have the reading light on and I could read. And I still have some problems now. What tends to happen to me now with sleep is I have a good night because I'm tired. Then the next night I kind of toss and turn. But that's common. We also have to make sure, are these kids getting enough exercise? Lots of exercise is really important for reducing bad behavior. Mother used to say, go outside and run the energy out of you. And I find I do exercise now. I go for walks. Now this COVID, we're not going into work very much. And I do sit-ups, do 100 sit-ups. And I do not enjoy it. I hate exercising. But I find that when I exercise, it helps to calm me down. That's another very, very simple thing you can do. Now, this is one of my most basic books on autism, The Way I See It. It's available through Amazon. And it has a lot of little short chapters that will answer a lot of the questions. But some of these behavior things, I'm going to have to get a lot more information. Now, we've got one question here from Shawani about seizures. And there are some situations where epilepsy can bring on aggressive behavior. And that's treatable with anti-seizure medications or anticonvulsants. That's treatable with medication. If you, especially in a nonverbal individual, let's say he just hits and there's no reason for it. Just no reason for it, just hits. That might actually be epileptic, especially if he kind of tunes out and does a staring spell. That's treatable with medication if you have that problem. But there's other times that kids hit because they've learned that they can get out of doing something you want them to do. Many times I've talked to parents and teachers where the child will be good at school and behave really badly at home, or maybe the other way around, behaves really well at school and behaves really badly at home. And that's because the rules are different. You need to have really big consistency on getting on, there's some expectations for behavior. You don't just hit because you don't want to do something. Now, you do need to differentiate that from sensory overload. If I take the child down into the train station and he's screaming and yelling when the train comes in, that is probably sensory overload. Now, one of the ways you can help with some of the sound sensitivity problems is to give the child a sense of control. One common one we have is a child's afraid of the vacuum cleaner. Maybe a hairdryer is afraid of it because it makes a loud noise. And if the child can control that thing that makes the loud noise, they can turn it on and off. They might get desensitized. There was a child that was terrified of sirens on the fire engine. So they took him down to the firehouse and they let him turn on the siren. And that helped him to get over being afraid of it because it gives them a sense of control. Some children will wear headphones all the time to block out sound. But the problem is, if you wear headphones all the time, it's going to make your brain more sensitive. And you want to tell the child you can always carry them with you, always have them, but you don't want to be wearing them all the time. Maybe we put them on in the train station. which is really super noisy, but try not to wear them other times. But you have them there if you need them. Okay, here's a lot of stuff about hitting. This is where I have to find out exactly when they're doing it, because I have to find out, I've got to, if it's a nonverbal individual, a hidden painful medical problem, I got to rule that out. Are they only hitting when they're in super loud places like the train station or maybe big crowds? And then after I rule that out, then I've got to figure out, are they hitting to get out of doing something? Hitting to get attention? And figure out why they're doing it, and then I can deal with it. There's a tendency to overgeneralize way too much. They'll say, well, how do I teach autistic kids? Well, if kids are 3 years old, they need about 20 hours a week of one-to-one instruction from an effective teacher. Okay, what is an effective teacher? It's a teacher that gets more language, gets more skills. Potty training has come up here. Those are a better behavior. Learn how to dress themselves, learn potty training, learn how to eat correctly with the utensils or chopsticks. Don't be just picking everything up with your hands. You got to teach them. Now, some of these children, there's a problem with very slow processing. And so you want to teach them something like potty training. An adult has to demonstrate it. And when I say do not leave out any parts of the task, I mean it. If they don't see the whole task, then they're not going to understand what they're supposed to do. And that often, helps on that. And then, of course, get them on a schedule where you take them into the toilet, right after, run the gap in the morning, maybe right after breakfast and mid-morning, and then you reward them, for using it correctly. And we've got, the problem we've got with autism is once you get through the very young childhood, the autism varies from the most brilliant computer programmers you have in India to somebody that can't talk and also cannot dress themselves. And I think it's kind of ridiculous that the same name is put on this. There's a way too much overgeneralization. I kind of want to get away from the diagnosis. Let's look at what is the problem. A little kid's not talking, or a kid is hitting. The first thing I got to know is the age. Am I dealing with a 2-year-old or a teenager that's hitting? And we have to start looking a lot more into what kids can do when they grow up. When I was, I have worked with every major, meat processing company that we have in the United States, big meat processing companies, working on with people. We're building big, complicated food factories, big, complicated jobs. I'm not talking about building a shopping center. I'm talking about building much more complicated stuff. And I worked with brilliant people that designed these things, that did very high-end skilled trades where they're designing and building things. And I'm going to estimate that 20% of the really skilled people I worked with were either autistic, dyslexic, or ADHD. I am saying that seriously. And right now, in my country, we have a shortage of some of these high-end skilled trades. And so we have to import poultry processing equipment from Europe, because some of the kids that should grow up and design that stuff are in special ed. You see, I'm in the unique situation where I'm going back and forth between the special education autism world and the industrial world. I can tell you, I like the industrial world really much. It's really, really fun. Now we're working on a project right now with a guy, he's near to retirement age now, does specialty welding. He can build anything. Give him a little drawing and he'll go build some electrical boxes for you. Or he'll build a barbecue shaped like a gun. Just all kinds of, clever things. Really, really clever. Okay, here's somebody's asked here about dietary. There are some individuals where food does make a difference. Now, one advantage you have with rice is it doesn't contain gluten. You know, that rice is, if you're doing dairy-free and gluten-free diet, rice is on that diet. So Indian food's actually pretty easy, but there are some individuals, it's not a cure. I want to emphasize that it's not a cure, where if you take dairy, milk products out of the diet, or you take grain gluten out of the diet, you can get improvements. I'll make it very clear. So you get improvements. It's, here's somebody that got rejected from a normal school. Well, I need to find out what the problem is. And one of the big problems I had when I got older was bullying. When I was 14, 15 years old, 13 years old, I was bullied in school. I was called all kinds of names. It was absolutely terrible. And the only place I was not bullied was where I had a friend through a shared interest. And for me, it was horseback riding and electronics. For another child, it might be singing, or it might be art, doing art, or it might be building things. Friends through shared interests. I cannot emphasize that enough. The other thing you've got to do with these kids is what I call stretching. There's a tendency sometimes for parents to overprotect the child. Several years ago, I went and visited the family. It was a computer programmer. Dad was a computer programmer at one of our big tech companies, and they had a nonverbal autistic child, and he wasn't learning any basic skills. And one of the reasons for that is the mom says, okay, I'm going to just feed him. Well, he's like 10 years old and we're feeding him like a baby. No attempt had been made to teach him how to eat correctly. You have to stretch them. Now, you don't just take them and shove them in the noisy train station. You don't do that, but you stretch just outside the comfort zone and you give them some choices. And here's an interesting question. Would an autistic boy be fit to be a husband? Yeah, they can be. There are many husbands in Silicon Valley, which is where our tech industry are, that are undiagnosed autistic, and they're husbands. Now, where there's a problem is the wife doesn't understand them because they seem kind of non-emotional. So learning about autism can help the wife to understand them. And we have many undiagnosed people with autism in our tech industry, and they tend to avoid the labels, and they're brilliant. We have people that are probably autistic that are running these companies. We'll let you figure that out for yourself, who they might be. And the thing that the wife has to understand is that the autistic brain is much more logical. It's not run by emotion. It's run by logic. And I had a wife come up to me in the Denver airport and tell me that my book, Thinking in Pictures, is my autobiography, that my book, Thinking in Pictures, saved their marriage because now they understood she understood how a husband thinks. Now, one thing that's never acceptable is an abusive situation. That's never, ever acceptable. And there are some women on the autism spectrum that have gotten into some very abusive marriages because they just, want a relationship so bad. Now, abuse, that's never acceptable. But the thing that can help is when you understand that the way the person thinks is different. And the thing that happens in our tech industry is they tend to avoid the labels because they'd rather have their primary identity be computer programmer for big tech company, rather than autistic. But I worked with some of the most brilliant people building things that were autistic. They were super brilliant, and they are not getting replaced. We have a shortage right now in my country of skilled trades people that can just build things. Another mistake that's been made in our schools is taking out hands-on classes, art, cooking, sewing, woodworking, metalworking, fixing cars, because there's a lot of individuals on the spectrum that are very good at these things. And those are skills that other people want. The other thing is they are skills that are COVID proof. They are skills that are economic recession proof. Okay, let's look at Motorola 1. My son is 10 years old, dislikes academic activities in spite of all the therapy and effort. What is the solution? Well, I was a little older and I was a terrible student, and I was not the least bit interested in studying. And I had a wonderful science teacher. And what Mr. Carlock, my science teacher, did is show me how studying is a pathway to a goal. If I want to become a scientist, then I'm going to have to study. And he gave me all kinds of interesting projects to do. You probably saw the optical illusion room that was shown in the movie. And he challenged me to, to build it. But one of the ways to motivate a kid to study is when studying becomes a pathway to something that the child wants. So on Motorola's question here, I want to find out what interests this kid. Now I'm seeing a lot of kids getting addicted to video games. I'd rather have them interested in fixing cars or programming computers rather than just playing video games all the time. But I'd find out what interests this kid. And something like cars, that's a real common, or trains. Those are very common interests. And then you can read about trains. You see, I'm tapping into his interest. I can do mathematics with a train. I could do a job in the railroad industry, design trains, drive trains. There's a lot of things I could grow up and do, and I need to study in order to get to something I want to do when I grow up. That's the way I would start getting him interested in academic activities. You see, you're not doing the academic activity just for the sake of doing it. You're doing it as a pathway to a goal. And then right away, I went from being a horrible student when I was in high school, this is when I was like 17, 18 years old, to being a good student, because now school was a pathway to a goal. Okay, here's a question from Madhu about homeschooling. Now, they can learn a lot of stuff at home, but you've got to get social exposure. Now, what's happening in homeschooling groups now, especially we've got COVID, there'll be several families will get together and make a little school. But a kid has got to get out and get social exposure to other kids. So what we're doing here in my neighborhood, I see it, 3 families will get together and take turns teaching the kids and make a little mini school. We also have a lot of empty office space right now. So in some of the businesses, they're turning conference room into school with social distancing. 3 children at a gigantic table, spaced apart, and the parents take turns teaching them. And it's a small amount of kids, and then you're not spreading COVID all over the place. But they, you look at the stuff on the, inclusive. I think one of the ways to get schools more inclusive is when you have a situation where a child did really well in an inclusive situation, write about it. How did you make it work? If a child's constantly screaming and hitting, that's very difficult for the teacher. But I'd say on the homeschooling, you've got to get those kids out. They've got to have social contact with other children. Right here where I live, we have it's called a nursery school for the little 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. Yesterday they were playing in the yard and with the teacher, and I'm glad to see them there. Those little kids, the under age 12, they really, really need the social. Now, when I'm teenage years was my worst years of bullying and teasing. Socializing with teenagers isn't all that important. That child can go from a child to a grown-up. And so if a kid is good at math, teach them higher math. Teach them programming. There's all kinds of stuff online that's free for teaching programming. But how could a kid get interested in computer programming if they're not exposed to it? They got to be exposed to it. And online, there's so much free stuff that you can get. here's a kid that's talking through rhyming. Another thing that's been learned about language is singing. Music circuits in the brain and verbal circuits are two different systems. So if something's wrong neurologically with talking, sometimes a child could kind of sing song. That's the rhyming too. That taps into the musical part of the brain. And then they might be able to learn to talk. Child, here's from Samindi to everybody. I have a 3-year-old, hyperactive. Well, again, is the kid getting enough exercise? You know, he might need some breaks to run around and do things. There needs to be very consistent rules. At the dinner table, we sit and eat and we have conversation with the family. Then it's a time where you gotta run around and do everything you wanna do. See, I was brought up in the 50s where I was expected to sit at the table and have manners. And if I stuck my finger in the water and stirred it, mother would say, use the fork, or if I went like this and I licked my fingers at the table, mother would say, that's rude to do that. You know, she'd give me the reason not to do it. Yep, there's a lot of, okay, we talked about dietary stuff. Maybe someone would like to ask me a verbal question rather than just looking at the chat.
Sure, Temple. I would like to request our host that if there's any parent, Temple, can you hear me first of all?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
So I would request our host, if there's any parent, please put it on the chat and go ahead, ask Temple right away. I mean, guys, is there anyone? Please do that. And so there is Shalini Sharma. So I request our host to unmute Shalini Sharma. And Shalini, please ask your question from Dr. Temple. Shiv, Ankur, our host, please unmute Shalini Sharma, guys, quickly.
Good evening, ma'am. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can hear you just fine. Yep,
Yeah,
I can hear you.
Yeah, I have, ma'am, 6 years old son, and he's very excited and speak too much. Okay, he will not let you to speak. He just speaking.
So he
And
knows, he's speaking and understanding speech. So he's fully verbal.
yeah, he understand everything. There is no problem with the understanding and there is no problem with the verbal. He's every time he's very excited, and there is no emotion control. Okay, and he always self-talk. If he's sitting alone, also he will be memorizing everything. If either it is from cartoon or some movies he saw, that he always speak. If I stop also, then also he will speak.
So in other words, if he wants a movie, wants you to turn on a movie, then he'll ask for the movie because that's something he wants. But he doesn't speak when it's something he does not want.
No, but if he sit alone also, he will speak the same thing. He just all the dialogues he will repeat. Whatever he listen, he repeats all.
So what he does then is you speak a word, like let's say you said train, and then he then echoes that word. If you said train station, then he might say train station. That's echolalia. Now, a child that there are some children that memorize movie scripts. So they watch a favorite movie over and over again, memorize all the scripts, everything that's said in that movie. But the problem is he may not understand what the language is. So he's memorized the entire audio portion of a cartoon, but may not understand what the words mean. What you have to teach him is the words have meaning. So one of the ways to teach him that the words have meaning would be to find some phrases in that movie that you could use in a real situation. you need to start teaching him names of things like favorite toys, favorite foods. So he starts to learn that words have meaning. There are 3 basic ways that cause speech problems in the brain. The first is auditory processing. When I was a young child and the grown-ups talked really fast, grown-ups talking fast, it sounded like blah, 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 blah. It turned into gibberish. I did not hear it. When grown-ups talked slowly, then I understood it. That's auditory processing. And when the little kid, my speech teacher would enunciate the hard consonant sounds. Like if I said cup, for example, if she said it too fast, I might hear just, ugh. So they'd say cup, and then they'd say cuppa. So that's auditory processing. Then I had problems with getting my speech out. Couldn't get it out. That's expressive. That's the second way speech can have a problem. And the third way is a child that has speech, but he's just memorizing movie scripts and things that he's heard over and over again on a video. But he doesn't know what the words mean. And you have to teach him what the words mean. And I'd start by taking some phrases out of the movie and using those phrases and sentences in a place where they would have an appropriate meaning in the real world, and then start teaching him names of favorite foods and toys, things like that. You know, that might be helpful. These kids, there needs to be some expectations, you know, for behavior. You know, there's a time to run around and play. A lot of these kids have a lot of energy. And then we need to have at least 20 minutes at the dinner table where we're going to eat as a family. And this gets back to turn taking, where we take turns in conversation and talk about what we did that day. That's turn taking. That's why it's so important to teach the little ones turn taking, because you have to wait and take your turn. And that helps with the impulse control. And I remember when I, you know, first started playing this little game, you know, this board game where you put dice in a cup and shake them out. And I'd grab the cup and mother would say, you have to wait for your sister to take her turn. See, that's an important thing to teach these kids, just calmly. And then some of them have got a lot of problems with really noisy places like the train station. You know, that, or they just get in a big crowd and they get completely overwhelmed. Another problem area is multitasking. I had to do a conference for pre-recorded talk for a veterinary conference on the most awful internet program. This company's going to go out of business. Their platform's so terrible. They wanted me multiple windows open, my phone, they wanted my phone on and computer stuff on, like 3 windows open. I'm going, this is something I just don't do. I don't multitask. This is one thing these kids are not very good at is multitasking. And I'm still not good at multitasking. But the kind of work I do with design, I don't have to multitask when I'm designing something or writing a paper. Sleep issues, that's common.
So I'll request, thank you, Shalini. So I'll request our host now to unmute Brian Rodrigues. Thank you, Shalini. Yeah.
Good evening. This is Janice Rodrigues, and we are the proud parents of 2 autistic children. One is aged 12 and one is aged 10. Before I start with our query, it's actually overwhelming to hear Temple. We've only read her books, but this is actually an overwhelming experience for us. Anyway, without wasting any time, our query here is that our 12-year-old daughter is very meticulous in all her household activities, and especially during the lockdown, it has been a blessing. Yeah, and
is she fully verbal?
She's not completely verbal, but
Okay.
let's partially verbal, and she knows how to get her way around. Yeah, I would say that with her speech, it's not.
The thing you have to look at in these things, on whatever you're doing, are you seeing improvement? Okay, with a little child, it'd be more language. and more skills like dressing and eating. Maybe with an older child, you know, is the person improving? Then you know that you are doing something right. There's a lot of arguments about different therapies and things like that. But the thing that I have found is effective teaching. And effective teaching means okay, let's say the child was hitting. Well, the hitting is either stopped or it's gotten greatly reduced. That would be a sign of effective teaching.
Okay,
I
I'm so
want to see her, she's partly verbal. Now, can she do basic skills? Dressing, potty, and eating correctly? Can she do that? Because that's the first thing I want to work on right now is, I call that the foundation of the house. Basic, just doing your basic skills. That she can get up in the morning, get dressed. Can she cook something simple? You know, those are just basic skills things. So that would be the things I'd want to make. She needs to learn those things. Is she doing fairly well with that?
Janice, you there?
Hello.
Yeah, Janice, can you hear what Temple was saying?
May not. Yeah, see the chat's coming through really well because it's.
Hello.
Is the first thing I want to do if she's partially verbal is I want to work on basic skills.
Yeah. Well, I would like to add on here, Temple, is that my daughter actually handles the kitchen almost 80%.
Good.
Yeah?
Well, good, because that's a skill that she could get a job in, working in a kitchen. That's good that she's doing that. No, that's something to be proud of.
I'm really proud. That's why when I introduced myself, I said I'm a proud parent. And now the task here comes to with my son. Now my son is 10-year-old and he's also on the spectrum. Now what happens is when my daughter sees that my son is unable to complete a task or an activity, immediately like she does it, you know.
Well, that's good. That's the right thing, you know, to tell him. And then hopefully your son is gradually improving. See, that's the thing I always look at. If you're doing something where you're getting better and, you know, improving, then you're doing something right. I always look at what the outcome is. And if he's improving, then you're doing something right. And it's really good that your daughter's able to run the kitchen. That's really good. That's great.
Yeah, but the task here is that she's good in everything except when it comes to my son. When she sees that he is not unable to complete the task at her pace, you know, she gets aggressive. And the meltdowns.
So the 10-year-old gets aggressive when she's asked to do something.
No, sorry. The 12-year-old, who's my daughter, who is completely independent, gets aggressive on the 10-year-old or on us if she sees that my 10-year-old is not able to complete the task immediately. Well, on the other hand, my 10-year-old takes time to complete the task, but he does it. But we are not able to make her understand that, you know, a person can take his own time and complete the task, because she is on that wavelength that she learns quickly and she does everything, you know, at a very perfect level. She's expecting that to happen with her brother as well, who's 10 years old.
Well, he may not be capable of doing it faster. You know, there's some where it's going to go more slowly. But he's doing it. Yes, and you know, hitting him or something like that, that's never acceptable. Hitting is never acceptable, period. Yeah. Unless somebody's attacking you, you don't hit. And that it may just take him longer to do it.
Yeah, but how do we explain it to my daughter? This is our you know, our main concern for quite some time.
Well, maybe it's sort of like racehorses. And some horses run faster than other horses. It's
Yes.
just the way they are. Maybe you can explain it to her that way. Some horses are just slow, and that's just the way they are. But they still would get around the track. They won't win the race, but they would still run around the track. They would still do it. You know, maybe that's a way to explain it. Now, I've got a question here from Garang I want to answer. My son is 9 years old. He likes to explore about the universe. Should I develop that interest? Yes, I would develop the interest in the universe. And, you know, there's all kinds of stuff on the NASA website in the US, really wonderful stuff about outer space. The SpaceX has all kinds of wonderful stuff. Astronomy, I would definitely encourage that. If the 9-year-old's good at math, maybe he needs to be given more difficult math. Maybe he needs to be introduced to computer programming. No, the universe is the kind of thing I like to have the kid interested in. Trains are also good because both the universe and trains can lead to careers. So anything like that, yes, I want to encourage an interest in the universe and getting materials on that, because that could lead to possibly a career in science. But that's kind of interest where you work math into it, you work reading in it. Let's read about the planets, let's read about galaxies, maybe look at all the images from the Hubble Space Telescope. And this stuff is all free online on things like looking at, you can go on to Google Images or some other search engine images, and you can look at pictures of the universe. Like right behind me right now is my Hubble Space Telescope poster. No, I really like all the NASA stuff. So that's something that I would definitely encourage that, because that's a great thing to be interested in, the universe. That's wonderful. You see, now here's somebody saying, Jack Karan is saying, my son has some sensory issues, can't speak clearly. What do I do in this situation? Well, there are some kids, they're not going to learn to speak. But some of the nonverbal kids can learn to type. Just type on a tablet, maybe even on a phone. Phones are a bit small, but maybe just type on a tablet. Sometimes they can do that. Okay, we already talked about diet. Aggression and seizures I talked about. Okay, self-talk. Okay, Tavishi said, well, talking to myself, I still sometimes do that. But what I've learned is I can do it when I'm alone. Other places I don't do it. You know, you just make a rule. There's certain times when I'm alone, I can do that. Other times I just don't do it. The other thing that I find helps on, you know, when I was starting out my career, a lot of people thought it was really weird. So what I would do, I'd show people my work. And when people saw my drawings, here are some of my drawings right here, maybe you can see them. I'd show off my drawings that I'd done of different cattle facilities. Then people gave me respect. I think we need to have the emphasis on showing what the kid can do, where they'd have skills. What are things that they can do? People respect ability and things like art, mathematics, building things, fixing cars, being knowledgeable about things. Some of the people that are word thinkers, they've been very good at selling cars because they'll know every specification of every new car they have there to sell. And they've gone into car dealerships and just sold cars. The problem you've got with autism is it's such a broad spectrum. You're going from, you know, the people that bring us the technology we're using today, okay, to somebody that can't talk and can't dress themselves. And we call it the same name. Doesn't really make very much sense. Just don't get hung up on these labels. I'd rather look at, okay, what is the specific problem? Okay, here's about transitioning from school to college. Somebody asked about that. First of all, I want to make sure by the time they get to that age that they've got some work skills. Because I have seen individuals with autism graduate from college and then have a very bad time in the workplace because they never learned any work skills. Work skills are different than academic skills. As I said previously, that starts with chores at home, like maybe helping with the cooking or cleaning the house, to volunteer jobs or little paid jobs outside the home starting at 10 or 11, help out at a little store or whatever. And then, you know, doing a real job when they get a little bit older and learning work skills. Another problem we've had when they transition to college is some supports they might have had in high school, like maybe having an aide with them. They're not going to have that in college. Auditory hypersensitivity, that can be a real problem. Again, working with the younger kids, give the kid control of a noisy thing. Okay, now what are we going to do about the train station? Well, you could get an audio recording of the trains coming in where the child can play it at different volumes, where they control it. And then they might get better able to tolerate that. And there's a very interesting therapy called environmental enrichment is an effective treatment for autism. And it is in the way I see it book. Environmental enrichment is an effective treatment for autism. And what you do is you stimulate two senses at the same time. Like you might touch a cold water glass and then listen to some music. You know, two different senses stimulated at the same time. And what I think it does is it reduces sensory oversensitivity. If you want to find those papers, you need 3 key words to put into the internet: autism, environmental enrichment. 3 key words: autism, environmental enrichment. Now, the anger stuff, I always have to rule out the hidden painful medical problem and epileptic stuff. Now, after I've ruled that out, well, I had penalties for anger behavior. TV was taken away for 1 night. Now, if you have a child where the anger is just constant, hitting and everything, then you start rewarding them for going longer and longer periods of time without any hitting. Then you go the other way. Triggers for anger, well, sometimes they just don't want to do something, or it might be sound sensitivity. If the anger happens in noisy places like train station, then that's sound sensitivity. I have to find out what's bringing on the anger. Is it sensory or is it bad behavior? I've got to determine that. Okay, I've had several questions here about service animals, like dogs, for example. Some kids really respond well to dogs. Also, they have to take care of it and feed it. So that's a good way to teach responsibility. And what I have found with autistic kids, there's like 3 ways that they relate to animals. The first way, and really common, is just they just love them, just love animals. Then you have kids who are a little bit afraid of a dog at first, and then they really get to love them. And there's a few kids that don't like dogs because of sound sensitivity. It might bark and you can't control it, or they don't like the way it smells. Here's a thing on impatience in my 8-year-old son. Again, this gets back to the impulse control. This is why it's so important to teach the little ones turn taking. How do you wait and then take your turn? And here's a kid that's getting aggressive, getting worse. He's 4.5 years old with horrible aggression. I would just start on that. If he can go just a few minutes without being aggressive, he gets a reward. In other words, reward him for not being aggressive. If it's just happening all the time. You see, for me, they took stuff away, but I didn't get aggressive very often. I got aggressive when I was a young child, maybe 3 times during the fall, maybe every just few weeks. And so the rule is very clear: aggression at school, aggression at home, no television for 1 night. Very calmly, uniformly applied. But then you have the kids where it's just nonstop aggression all the time. Then you have to use the opposite way of dealing with it, where I'm going to reward him for going increasingly long periods of time without having aggression or some other behavior absolutely don't want. You know, in Down syndrome children, you deal with it the same way as you would with autistic kids. All right, here's the kid that likes fans. You see, that's sensory. He likes fans, and he's 6 years old. Well, you could read about how fans are manufactured. You could study revolutions per minute when he gets a little older. That's mathematics. How fast a fan turns. There's all kinds of physics and the type of blades that fans have. The different kinds of electric motors that turn fans. You see how many tech things and career things that I can work into an interest in fans. Different blades get different airflows. There's a reason why ceiling fans have big, broad blades, because it turns slowly. There's a reason for why they're designed the way they are. He's 6 years old, but now when it comes to just looking at them, then you make a time and a place. For me, dinner table, 20 minutes at the dinner table, manners. Then after lunch, I could go and spin things. Okay, so after lunch, you can go look at fans. But at the dinner table, we don't look at them. We might talk about how they work at the dinner table. You see, that's making an associative link into fans. We're having lots and lots of problems with anger. I'm seeing a lot of questions here. Lots of problems with anger. Another problem I see is where at school, the anger may be under control. At home, it's terrible. Or at home, the kid behaves, and at school, he's anger. This is where the school and parents have to work together and have the same rules. Okay, if you do anger, this is the penalty for anger. And of course, you always have to rule out in the nonverbal individual, does he have a painful problem, medical problem he can't tell you about? Socializing kids, that's going to happen through shared interests. Get the children together in something they like to do. It might be soccer, or football, as you call it. It might be a sport. It might be playing a musical instrument or making art or programming computers. These are things where they can socialize. We're getting a lot of anger issues.
So Temple, do you want to take some verbal question there?
Yeah, sure. All right, I'll do some verbal questions.
Yeah, there are two folks who repeated it saying, and guys, please understand, we are trying to take as many questions. So I would like two folks, Krishik and Deepika. So first, Krishik, if our moderator and host can unmute Krishik T, and then we'll go to Deepika H. So Krishik, please ask your question from Temple.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, hi. Krishik is my son's name. He is 8 years old. I have 3 queries for you, Temple. Those are, number 1, he cannot control his laugh. That is number 1. Number 2,
yeah.
Sorry?
He can't control his what? I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
His laughing. He cannot control his laugh.
Okay, laughing.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And the second one is, he cannot control his voice while speaking. He has a very big voice, very loud voice. He cannot control his voice while speaking.
So he's too loud. You know what might work? You can probably find an app for a phone that's a sound level meter where it measures how loud sound is. I'm sure there's an app that you could find on the internet for a sound meter that you could put on your phone, and then it would have a little graph and you could look at that when he's speaking too loud. You might be able to pick that up free somewhere. Now, laughing inappropriately, I remember one time I was on a plane and I got laughing so hard at a funny movie that people were turning around. And maybe gradually as he gets a little older, he'll get better at that.
Yeah, actually, when he laughs is when he's not doing anything. Like if he's studying or if he's doing an activity, he will not at all laugh, and he do not have any sensory issues when he is doing a work. But when he's in his leisure time, he do that. The laughing, he'll be laughing.
Well, I think there's a time where he can be in private where he can just do this stuff. When I was his age, my thing was spinning things. So after lunch, I was allowed to have an hour where I could spin things, or he could have some time to go laugh. And that's his time when he's alone that he can do this. And then other times, like the dinner table, or we're shopping, you don't do that. In other words, give him a time and a place to do it. And then other places we don't do it. I think that's the thing to do. Now, somebody asked him on the chat whether
and I have one last query. My major problem is there is no socialization. He is not at all willing. He will be telling that I don't want to speak with anyone. He will speak with me, that is his mother and his father only. He will not at all speak with his grandparents also. He don't like to respond or to speak with them. Can you please suggest me on that?
Well, I think this is something where you gradually have to, give them some choices. You're going to learn to speak with some other people, and you can either speak to grandfather or grandmother, but you are going to start speaking with some other people. Or maybe we go in the store and he's going to have to ask for something, where he's going to have to speak to somebody else. What you got to do is push it a bit, but give some choices of maybe who he speaks to. He's got to get out and learn these things. That's something that he's got to learn.
Okay, sure. I'm really overwhelmed with the things you have shared. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mom.
I want to answer this question here. Here is a person with Asperger's. That would be, mild autism, no speech delay. He's employed, academically capable. Can he get married? Yes, he can get married. And oftentimes this works best on, where there's a shared interest. Maybe two computer programmers get married because they understand each other. Yeah, they definitely can. I mean, when I've done, before COVID hit, when I was doing autism talks, I had many grandfathers come up to me and they found out that they were mildly on the autism spectrum when the children got diagnosed. The grandfather realized that he's on the spectrum, and he was employed and married. And one of the reasons for that, especially people in my generation in the US, is that basic skills like manners and we're taught in a much more structured manner than they are now. And I'm seeing this over and over again where these grandparents are discovering that they're on the autism spectrum and they're married and they have jobs. Now, where understanding that can help is maybe the wife of this grandfather doesn't understand why her husband's not very emotional. Okay, so once you understand he's not very emotional, that's the way he is.
Right. Temple, there's a lady, Deepika H. Can we take her question?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yes. Ankur Shiv, can you please unmute Deepika? Deepika, please go ahead and ask a question. Ankur Shiv, can you please unmute Deepika H? Yes, Deepika, please speak.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks a lot for allowing me a question. Hello, Temple. I am a mother of a 6-year-old child who has started showing ADHD symptoms. So I just wanted to know, I am overwhelmed listening about you and studying about you. So I just wanted to know what are the positive things which were taken into your upbringing or from your experience. What are the positive points which are like do's and don'ts of bringing up a special child? Like we need to take care of diet, or there must be some do's and.
Well, the real positive things that were done with me, by the time I was 7 and 8 years old, it became very obvious I was good at art. And art was always encouraged. They got me art materials. I was encouraged to do lots of different art. In the beginning, I would just draw a horse head over and over again, just a horse head. Then mother encouraged me to draw the whole horse. draw where the horse lives in the stable. That was something very positive, was my art ability. I like to make things. You know, my book, Calling All Minds, that's my children's project book. No, just making simple things like making paper snowflake. We had lots of fun building things when I was a child. We'd take hammers and screwdrivers and handsaw and we'd make stuff. That was stuff we did. But take the thing that the child's good at and build on it. Okay, this interest in fans, for example. He likes to, the child likes to look at fans, but then you can start learning about how fans work. Take something the kid is good at. Another person here is saying that the label puts the kid in a box. Now that is a problem. Now in the US, you have to have a label in order to get any special services. But sometimes it does put them too much in a box. Because you might have a child who's very good at music. The music ought to come first and the autism second. For me, scientist comes first, autism second.
Yeah.
Really important.
Actually, with my son, it happened, you know, he started watching too much of mobile and those rhymes like Halloween and all. But now what it has happened is when he sleeps at night, he's a little afraid. He won't even allow me to go to the washroom. I mean, he can't stay alone for a longer time.
Oh,
so I'm just a little afraid.
He's got to learn that sometimes he has to be alone. And what you need to do now is gradually start teaching him, rewarding him for being calm for longer and longer periods of being alone. Yeah, you see, this is where some of these kids, I'm looking at these questions in the chat. I'm seeing a lot of kids where I think maybe they got a little bit overprotected and need to be, you know, gotten out into the world. There's a nonverbal person named Tito Mukapadahe. He has a book called How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? It's available on Amazon in print and in electronic book. And he's he types independently, even though he's completely nonverbal. But his mother, Soma, would take him places. Well, okay, well, I'm going to take him to the market. I'm going to take him to the train station. Would take him to a whole lot of different places and got him out seeing things. It's sort of like, okay, we have one little tantrum in the market, so we don't go there. Well, one of the ways to deal with that is to bring him to the market at a time when it's not so busy. You know, we're going to go to the market. We'll just go when there's less people there. There's a tendency to overprotect. I'm just going through these questions on reading on the chat, and I'm seeing kind of a pattern here. Too much anger, doesn't do stuff, and there's a tendency for the parents to give in. But on the other hand, give them choices. Okay, we're going to go to the market. We'll let you pick the time of day we go. In other words, we're going to go to the market, but you get the choice of when we go. You see, that gives the child some control, but you still are getting out and doing things. Now we've gotten so much, I'm seeing, in looking at these chats, I'm seeing a lot of aggression problems. I'm seeing a pattern here. And some of these kids have learned that they can hit or do some of the really terrible behavior to get something they want or to get out of doing it.
Got it. Temple, there's a lady, Miss Mridul. She's waiting for some time. Mridul, why don't you ask away your question from Temple?
Thanks for, hi, doctor, how are you? I just have a query for my 10-year-old son. He is diagnosed with ADHD.
Okay.
So, sometimes he used to talk to himself, whatever stuff he used to watch on the TV or on the YouTube.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Right. And secondly, my question is what sort of career we could plan for him so that he'll be successful in his life, along with this ADHD problem.
Well, the first thing I just wanted to, where they've got some repetitive thing they want to do. The first thing I want to do is there's a time and a place for that. When you have some alone time, you can watch some video over and over again or do some behavior, talk to yourself or whatever. Other times we don't do this. There's a time and a place you can talk to yourself and a time and a place not to do it. Mm-hmm. And we need to make sure the kids are getting enough exercise. That's really
Okay.
important. You see, the way
Right.
my life was, strict rules at dinner time. I had to behave. But then I had time in my room where I could spin things. And then I had lots of time to be creative, to do things with other children, play outside. But it looks like in all the anger that I'm seeing on these chats, that we're letting them get away with too much anger. Once you rule out noise like the train station, you don't
Right.
punish that, but you ask him to pick up his clothes off the floor, pick up your clothes and hang them in the closet, and he makes a big anger. Yeah, I would have had a punishment for that. I would have had a TV taken away that night. That was the punishment they used on me. Mother would just say, really calm, after I'd calm down, you got angry and there'll be no television tonight. And they'd take it away for just one night. But then you got the kid that's constantly angry, hitting constantly. Then you have to go the opposite way, where you reward him for going increasingly long periods of time for not getting angry.
All right.
Because you can't just take away everything. You see, for me, maybe during the fall, for example, I might have had TV taken away 3 or 4 times. But if you take it away all the time, it doesn't work, because then they just give up.
And how
But
do you
there
think
needs to-
like this physical punishment works, or like, like, or something else will work, like, just to improve his behavior?
Well, I'd rather not do physical punishment. I'd rather do rewards, or taking away something like looking at videos on a phone.
Right.
You know,
By
saying
the
he
few
likes to
of
want
his
to play
toys
with the
or
phone.
something.
Yeah, then you have one day where you're not allowed to use the phone. Whatever, I'd rather use something. In my generation, it was the television. So as long as I was good, I got to watch my children's show every night, Howdy Doody. That was my children's show. I got to watch that. And if I got angry, Mother would calmly say, you know the rule, no television tonight. Well, and you do the same thing.
Right.
You know the rule, no phone videos tonight.
Right.
Or whatever.
And doctor, what
thing you-
sort of career like we could plan for him so that we'll be more focused for his career as well?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having a bit of a problem on understanding.
Okay, so doctor, I just want to understand, like as he is an ADHD child, so what sort of careers we can plan for him so that we'll be focused?
Well, some ADHD kids, you give them the stimulants, and they're really helpful. If you try stimulant drugs, you will know on one pill whether it works or not. And if it doesn't work, then you don't use it. The other thing that will help a lot of these kids is exercise. And now with COVID, kids are not getting out and getting enough exercise, because that also helps to calm down. Now, the thing I found that helped me with lockdown, when lockdown started in the US, we were locked down for about 6 weeks. It helped me, and I still do it now. Get up, take a shower, get dressed, and put on work clothes. Okay, I've got on the same shirt I would wear if I had flown on an airplane to see you. I have on my dress work clothes.
Right.
And I have found that that's really important for my well-being. One day I spent the day in wearing what I sleep in. I felt just terrible. You got to get up, get dressed for work. That's really important. Get on a schedule.
Doctor, my question is about the child's career, future. So what sort of profession we can plan for him, and we can put up in his mind, and we can plan the things for his career, his profession.
Well, the profession, there's different kinds of thinking. You've got the visual thinking mind, like me. My kind of mind is going to be art, graphics, or it's going to be a skilled trade, like fixing cars, high-end skilled trade. The more mathematical ones, it's going to be engineering, computer programming would be the main careers. Word thinkers, it would be journalism, writing.
Okay.
Also, a specialized sales, like selling cars, because the
Oh.
word thinker can would memorize all the features of every car they had there on the lot to sell. So those are things that can, be possible good careers. Some individuals are a visual thinker like me, some are a math thinker, and some are in fact, in my book, The Autistic Brain, I talk about, the different kinds of thinking.
Right. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
So, Temple, there is a very important question and very unique question from a lady, Genevieve. I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong. Can you please advise how to prepare a ASD girl for puberty? And this is for a boy as well. This is a very critical time for all the parents. So, any advice to parents that when the kids hit that particular age, what they should do for a girl and for a boy? Any thought on that?
Okay, now what age were you talking about?
It's around 13, 14.
Around puberty. Well, that
Yeah.
was the worst part of my life. Absolutely the worst part of my life. And I was bullied and I was teased and I had friends through shared interests, which at that time in my life was horses and electronics. Now, those are activities that I could do with other individuals, and that's where I had friends. Now, there's a question here from Sanvi about not picking up social cues. You have to be taught. You see, in most people, learning social cues is like innate. It's like instinctual. But for me, I have to be taught like acting in a play. Somebody has to teach me how to look at the social cues. You just have to be taught. And I still don't pick up, social cues. And I've learned how to do business social. But there's some things that are going to be different. And if you look at a lot of people that are in engineering and computer programming, they're not very social. And the reason they're not that social is they got a little bit of autism. That kind of goes with engineering and computer science. You got to be a little bit autistic to do it. You see, it's a true continuous trait. But I'm seeing a pattern here through a lot of these chats, an awful lot of anger issues. And if the anger is, not, let's say, happening in a quiet place, like not the train station, because that would be sensory overload. These kids have learned that they can manipulate with anger. They can get attention. They can escape from a task they don't want to do. I could have gotten into that really easily. I wasn't allowed to do that. Down syndrome child, you are going to have, there's a lot of questions here about Downs, and you're going to have, they're going to have intellectual disabilities. Down syndrome child is not going to do stuff at the college level, but they can do things where they could work in a store, for example, as a job. That would be something they could do, stocking shelves. I think it's important for people to have useful work where they feel that they're valued. And the Down syndrome person is perfectly capable of learning how to take merchandise out of boxes and put it on the correct shelf in a store. Most Down syndrome individuals will have it intellectually are capable of, that job, that particular job. Attention seeking. The thing I'm saying is I'm going through these questions. There's a child that's very intelligent. Somebody just asked about that. Give him harder math if he's a math kid. Give him more difficult books to read. If you've got a 6-year-old that wants to read the high school books, let him read them. Really intelligent child, expand it. Give them the next grade's materials. Take higher math. Those are things that you can do.
Temple, the main problem in this is, and there are many questions, we can give that, but there's an attention span issue. So Abhir, Khushbu, they are all asking the same thing, that when we make a child sit, the concentration and attention is very short. How should we make them for longer time, number one, and how to also increase the level of difficulty while increasing the attention span. So any
Well,
thought?
you see, then you have things where their attention span's good. They're playing some video game, and I'm seeing a lot of problems with getting addicted to video games, and they got a great attention span for playing video games. One thing is it's going to be easier to keep their attention span if it's something they're interested in. Let's go back to the child who was interested in the universe. Well, let's teach reading about telescopes, because you use telescopes to learn about the universe. They're going to have a better attention span on, let's say, the kid's into some video game. Well, who made that video game? How are video games made? Let's learn some JavaScript, because that's how you make video games. You see, what I'm doing is I'm making a link back to their interest. They seem to have a wonderful attention span for video games. And I had a short attention span, but if it was something that interested me, and so you make an associative link back to the thing that they're interested in, and that will often help on the attention span. See, the other thing is, for me to start paying attention to academics, school had to become a pathway to a goal. This is really important. There's a reason for studying, so that when I grow up, I can become an astronomer, let's say. Or let's say maybe for the Down syndrome child, I can work in a local store. Now the child that's really intelligent ought to be going to college or doing a very, very high-end skilled trade, but there are, if somewhere there's definite intellectual disability, but working in a store would be a reasonable goal. And people like, even nonverbal people, like doing something that's helpful, real work, even if it's just sweeping the floor in the store. That's something that you're doing work that other people appreciate. Okay, now here's a question about epilepsy. Yeah, obviously that has to be treated. And you can sometimes get anger stuff where it's epileptic, but when that happens, there's no reason for the anger. They just do it. It might be perfectly quiet, and there's an anger attack, and it's actually a seizure. That's treatable with medication, and I discussed that in my Way I See It book. Now we've had a question here about my son just makes noises. There are some individuals who are not going to learn to speak, and it's just not going to happen. But they might be able to learn to communicate by pointing to a board that's got different symbols on it for things they might need. And you can just make that with a piece of cardboard, where it's just a little board and they can point to, I'm cold, I'm hot, I need the bathroom, I need a drink, where they can just request things that they want. There's a lot of issues with food sensitivities, kids being picky eating. A simple way to help them with that is get them in the kitchen and get them involved in making the food. And they can play in it, stuff in the kitchen. We don't allow playing with food in the dining room. When we're at the dining room table, we have our manners. But in the kitchen, you can play with it. Sometimes that helps with picky eating.
Right.
Okay, here's somebody that's 22 years old, happy, nonverbal. Sounds like now this may be a situation where he's getting angry because he can't communicate. You've got to give an individual a way to communicate. Not being able to communicate is very, very frustrating. And so the person that's nonverbal, he's going to have a way to communicate. It might be an app on a phone. It might be a piece of cardboard with pictures on it that he point to. Something very simple. But you've got to give them a way to communicate. So let's just review things that cause anger. It could be a hidden painful medical problem. It could be epilepsy. It could be frustration because they can't communicate because they're nonverbal. Now in fully verbal kids, it often is get attention or to get out of doing something. They throw a fit and get out of doing something.
Temple,
This is where you have to look at what I'm saying. Certain attention. There's certain questions as I scroll through the messages where it's a lot of the same stuff over and over again.
Yeah. So Temple, there's Dr. Ashok Shah. He wants to ask, I believe he's a professional in this field. So Dr. Ashok, why don't you ask your question? We have a couple of folks lined up, Chaili Gupta, Pawan, Anjali. So Dr. Ashok Shah, please go ahead with the question from Temple.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm doctor by profession, actually surgeon, and a father of 24-year-old son, Aditya. He has completed his graduation. He's fairly socialized also, and he is a member of even a Leo club, which is a part of Lions International, where he learned better socialization there.
Good.
He has some issue of pragmatic speech and comprehension. And especially something you talk about the social cues, which sometimes he misread or misrepresents also. Second thing is now because he is completed his graduation, right now he's doing a part-time job in my hospital to make him work or awareness of the job, this thing. But I want him to go out and do the work, which is bit reluctant, and outside world also it's bit reluctant because of his little bit communication issue. He can communicate well, but not to the extent that other probably neurotypical people will communicate. That's the issue.
He may not ever, communicate as well, but he can still learn to do things. One of the things to do that is really important when you're stretching to get him to do something new is give him some choices, limited choices. You could do this or you can do that, but just sit in your room all day. There's a time you can sit in your room, but you just can't do that all day. And then the other thing you always got to look at is even with someone who's 34 years old, they can still improve.
Yeah.
Is he improving? That's a really important key. Is he improving?
He is improving, but it is like a give and take situations. Like if he doesn't behave or if he doesn't do the work, then he doesn't, I don't pay him the stipend or pay his salary. I hold on for some time, then he completes the things and he gets it back. That is one thing. And second, one more issue is he is reasonably independent in almost everything except absolute independent traveling. He can travel with the friends, he can go for the games, cricket, football, gym independently, but traveling by the public transport, it's very difficult for him. And in a city like a Mumbai, it's a chaos bit. So
well, what you can do on the traveling by public transport is work them into it slowly. Like the first few trips to a certain place, you're on the bus with him.
Yeah.
And then we wean you off slowly. Let's say there were 2 buses he had to go on to go to a certain place. So you're coming back home, you stay in the station, and he does the last bus himself.
Right.
You see, you do it slowly. You wean them slowly. So the first few trips you go on for the whole trip. Then, so let's say it's a 2-bus trip. Then when you start to wean off, right. He's getting ready to get on the final bus home. You stay in the station. Right. And then he goes home by himself. And then you have him do it maybe 5 times where he does that last bus himself. Okay. And then we'll do it to where, then you start to teach him the transfer.
Okay.
Where you gradually do it, where you go on the bus with him maybe 5 times for this one trip. Mm-hmm. And then the final bus, he goes home. You stay in the station. That's how you train him. You don't just throw it all at him. Let's just work one trip at a time. Okay, there may be a bus to go to work, another bus to go shopping. I don't know, whatever the buses are. Maybe start out with just this 1 bus trip first. And then you stay at the station and he goes home. You go on it maybe 5 times with him.
Okay.
The whole trip, 5 times. But not all in one day. Because nobody rides that many buses in one day. That's stupid. You have to do it like the real work would do it.
Right.
And then after you've done that 5 times, then you let him ride it home by himself. And he's learned what station to get off. And he's got to pay attention and get off at the right station. No, I think he can learn that.
Only thing is he doesn't like to come out of his comfort zone. He decides himself that comfort zone. Some friend is there, some mentor is there. He's okay with him traveling anywhere in Mumbai. But if he's left alone, then he gets panic or anxiety issue comes up. Second thing is like
I had a lot of problems with anxiety, and we're gonna have to end this in a few minutes. I have another appointment in half an hour. But in my book, Thinking in Pictures, I discuss my problems with anxiety. And there are a lot of teenagers and adults that might need to go on some medication for anxiety. And I've been on medication for anxiety for 40 years, and it really saved me. Now, not everybody needs it, but learning how to use the buses is something he needs to do, but we have to work into it slowly. There's a tendency to overprotect. Now, you don't just say, get on those buses and do it. You don't do that.
Right.
Would go on the first few trips.
Right.
That was done with me with the New York subway.
I think this is
and
already.
The first time I did it alone, it was just the train home.
Oh. He's already doing it with one of my what boy or friend or somebody like that. He is doing that. Only thing is he has got some back of a mind in the childhood. He met in an accident. And he always thinks that what if I meet with an accident or if I get kidnapped or something like that.
Well, the thing, yeah, you can worry about all those things. All kinds of stuff could happen. But usually it doesn't happen. Now, there's an interesting question here I want to answer because we're going to have to sign off soon on how does an autistic person perceive the world. This is one of the questions that's very different than the other questions. I work with logic. We've got a lot of problems in the world right now. And one of the things that I perceive is how can human beings be so illogical and do some of the stupid, aggressive stuff that they do? And I have a no politics policy, so I won't discuss it in detail. But some of the stuff that's going on right now today, I'm going, you've got to be kidding. I can't believe people are doing all this stupid, bad stuff. The other thing is I've been in an industry where you build things. I've been in the construction industry. We build things. We build things for the cattle industry out of steel and concrete. And people in construction make stuff, build things. Too many people today just, well, not just physically destroy stuff, but just, some of the stuff going on in the world today is very bad. And I want to do things to improve things. If being on this conference today, on this video conference today, helps a family with their child to get a good job, be a citizen that contributes, then I've done something good. That's a good thing to do. And that's the kind of stuff I would like to do.
So Temple, I totally agree with you. We have just 2 more questions. One is from Hemant Sharma. And Hemant, I would request to be very brief because it was 1 hour session and it's already 1.5 hours. So there are 2 questions, one from Hemant Sharma and Temple. The second one is on ABA. There are many parents who's asking the efficacy of ABA in the entire treatment. So probably we'll hear Hemant Sharma first. Hemant Sharma or Madhu, why don't you ask quickly your question from Temple?
Well, on the ABA, there's many different kinds of ABA. And some of it's really good, and some of it's not that good. Mm-hmm. And some of the bad ABA forced children's sensory overload. That is bad. Let's get back to the effective teacher. You're working with 3-year-olds. ABA, it was originally designed for little children, 3, 2, 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, to get language going and basic skills taught. Once a child, like me, that was doing normal schoolwork, you don't really use ABA anymore. It is originally a little kids program. And we've got to get back to having an effective teacher who gets more language and more skills like potty, dressing, bathing, eating correctly. And some teachers have the ability to do this, no matter what the name of the program is, and others do not. And there's some very good ABA where they take sensory issues into account, and there's some bad ABA where they might take a kid and just shove them into the train station. That's not the thing to do.
Okay.
That's forcing them into sensory overload. You don't do that.
Okay. Hemant, why don't you ask your question? Shiv, please quickly unmute Hemant. Hemant or Shiv.
Hi, Dr. Grandin. Thank you very much for the session today. I and my wife are really starstruck. I'll get to my question. I have a 5-year-old son. His receptive language is really good. He knows his sentences but prefers to use gestures, etc. We kind of know that he's finding it hard to get the right words out. What direction do you suggest we take to improve that?
Okay, I would suggest encouraging him to use his language. So you know he wants the juice, or you know he wants a water. Then you say, use your words. Now, these children have a slow processor speed. Remember I told you I'm not able to multitask? What you have to do is give the child time to respond. Say, now, you know he wants the water and he's pointing at it. And you have to say, use your words. Use your words. Now, you might have to wait 15 seconds. That's a long time because he has to process. He's a slow processor. And so you have to wait, give him time to process and say, now use your words. And then when he uses his words, you give him the water and you praise him. That's what you do. You always want to encourage the use of language, but you've got to do it calmly, because when they get excited, it's like a computer freezing. It's like, imagine he's like a phone with only 1 bar of service. A phone with a very bad service. And it takes a long time to download a web page. That's the way his brain is. Give him time to process, keep it really calm. You may have to wait 15 seconds. That's a long time. 15 seconds is a long time. And then when he uses his words, then you say, and you give him the water and you praise him. Always encourage him to use his words, but wait for him to respond. And I want to answer a question here about medication in young children. There was a question there about Risperdal. Those drugs have bad side effects. They should not be just casually given out to young children. And I'd recommend that you read the medical section in The Way I See It book. Too often, drugs are used as the first thing, as the first tool, where the first thing it should be used is like, okay, so they take the TV away from me for throwing a tantrum. Because when I was a young child, I wasn't given any medications. The younger a child is, probably the less medications you should have, unless he's got epilepsy. Then you have to treat the epilepsy. That has to have medication. But there's too many powerful medications given out way too casually to young children, when maybe a behavioral method should be used. We're going to have to wrap it up in a few minutes so I can get to my, can the kid drink camel milk? Absolutely, yes. Okay, a lot of these questions, similar things. Let's just finish it up with one final question, and then I am going to have to go to my other appointment.
So Temple, let me ask that last question, and this is from all the professionals in this particular field as well as the parents. So I messaged you about your science teacher, remember?
Yes, okay, good.
Dr. Carlock I have. See, he was so supportive to you. So is there any message to all the professionals and the parents to look upon the professional that how should they go about for the professional, number one, and how should the professional go about to the child? Because obviously all professionals over here are very
well. First of all, okay, Mr. Carlock was a very important mentor for me. He was my high school science teacher. So when I was 17 years old, I was a teenager, not studying. I was learning how to work. I ran our school's horse barn. I ran a horse barn for 3 years. So I learned how to work. I was not studying. Now, Mr. Carlock started out giving me interesting science projects, like working on the optical illusion room that's shown in the movie. we were doing electronics experiments. And this got me interested. Then, once he got me interested with these interesting science projects, now you want to become a scientist, you have to learn how to write. You're going to have to learn some math. You see, now, now studying was a path to a goal. That's the key. That's what Mr. Carlock did. He showed me how interesting science could be. So we did all these fun projects, but then we worked on studying too. And he was really important. So now I had the motivation to study, where previously there was no motivation to study because I had no goal. And Mr. Carlock gave me a goal of becoming a science teacher.
Got it.
Well, I think we're going to have to end it there. We've got a 14-year-old that loves to look at general knowledge books. Yes, I did that too. I would read those. Well, good. Let's find something in those books that he's interested in and try to develop it. So what I do with that, I do have to go. I've got another appointment, but it was wonderful talking to everybody.
Yes, and thank you, Temple. Thank you so much. The only thing I can say, you are a blessing to mankind, and I can't thank you enough from every parent, professional, Mons Belief team. So agreeing for this session, and for all the parents and professional, we'll send across Temple's presentation, which we're talking in the start of the session. If there's any question unanswered, we have taken all the questions. Our clinical team will answer those. And lastly, yes, we will send the recording. If you don't have a registration form, please send it to contact@monsbelief, and we will ensure on behalf of Temple that all the recording, presentation, and unanswered question by our clinical team will be done. So that's it. That's it from our side. And Temple, to you, a heartful thank you, and really thank you for all this session. It was a 1-hour session.
Well,
We shot 1 hour.
It went a bit longer. And here's a nice post from Bryn Rodriguez that says that his kids are champion swimmers. Well, that's the kind of positive thing. It's looking at what a person can do. We've got to get away from the label. What can they do? And this is why, for me, scientist comes first. That's who I am. Autism comes second. And I like the way I like my logical way of thinking. And some of the stuff going on in the world today, I just can't believe it. It's so not logical. But let's look at what a kid can do. You see, in Mr. Carlock, my science teacher, he got me interested in building interesting science projects, and then that motivated the studying. He was very important for me. I would not have had the good career I had without my science teacher. And I think that I'm going to have to leave at this point because I do have to go to the other appointment. But it's been wonderful, wonderful to be here. And I think ending up on these kids on the spectrum being champion skating and swimming, you see, that's looking at what they can do. Something specialized that they're really good at. And there's others, it's going to be computer programming for your tech industry. Not all of them, not for me. I'm more of the art mind. But we need all the different kinds of minds. You might want to look at my 2010 TED Talk, where I talk about the world needs all kinds of minds. It's on TED. You can find that easily online, Temple Grandin TED Talk. Right. And I think I will leave then. I'm going to have to leave the meeting now. And just want to thank everybody for coming. It's been just great to see everybody on.